When Thomas Frank was appointed as manager of Tottenham Hotspur, his job was to redefine the club's culture. But just 8 months later, he was sacked. And the decision wasn't a surprise. In fact, many were surprised that he lasted as long as he did. So, what went wrong so quickly? And why did Spurs eventually decide to part ways with Thomas Frank when they did? Well, welcome to Tifo Football by The Athletic. In retrospect now, it almost seems as though Frank was doomed before he started. When he joined, he said the only guarantee was that Spurs would, quote, lose games. In one light, that was a welcome piece of honesty, but over time it was seen as defeatist. It is a simple fact of football that managing bigger teams is different from managing smaller ones, and Frank struggled to convince that he could manage a club with the size and expectations of Tottenham. A Tottenham player, speaking to The Athletic on the condition of anonymity to protect relationships, revealed that he believed that while Frank's predecessor, Ange Postecoglou, was perhaps not the best coach, the players respected him, admired his charisma, and listened to what he said. Those same players soon stopped listening to Frank because, as this player saw it, he did not have the personality required to coach a big team. But even with these flaws, Frank was dealt a tough hand with a squad of players built together by a series of different executives for a series of very different managers, and the summer recruitment failed to improve things significantly. The club had lost the talismanic Son Heung-min, and Frank wanted proven quality and goals from out wide to replace him, along with a new number 6 to shore up the midfield, and most importantly, a new number 10 with Dejan Kulusevski and James Maddison both sidelined with long-term injuries. Spurs were able to sign Mohamed Kudus and Joao Palhinha quickly enough, but a top-quality number 10 proved more elusive. They had targeted Morgan Gibbs-White and Eberechi Eze, and they had got close to both, but ended up with neither. Then executive chairman Daniel Levy was suddenly desperate for a win in the market, and eventually did a £52 million deal to sign Xavi Simons from RB Leipzig. With an injury to Dominic Solanke, Spurs brought in Randal Kolo Muani late in the window, and while he, Kudus, Palhinha and Simons are not bad players, balanced against the departure of Son Heung-min and the injuries to Maddison, Kulusevski and Solanke, not many would say that Frank started with a strong squad. The window ended with fans furiously arguing about whether it had made the team and the squad better or worse. It felt like time for everyone to take a breath and focus on the football. But instead, September the 4th, 2025 proved to be one of the most dramatic days in the history of the club, because Levy, who had run the club with near total control for almost 25 years, was sacked. It was a genuinely shocking moment which marked a radical change in how the club was run, and it meant that the man who led the process to appoint Frank, who signed the players that he would choose from, was no longer in the building. Now, despite all of the instability, things did actually start well enough on the pitch. Spurs impressed in the UEFA Super Cup despite fading and losing on penalties to PSG, and after a 3-0 win over Burnley in the opening game of the season, players were visibly buzzing with optimism about this new chapter. The best result came when Spurs went to the Etihad Stadium in their second league game, deployed another masterclass of organisation, pressing and countering, and beat Man City 2-0. But this proved to be the peak of Frank's time at Spurs. Burnley was one of only 2 home league wins. And so many of the problems that Frank could never escape were evident in his third league game, a 1-0 home defeat to Bournemouth that actually flattered Tottenham. Spurs were limited on the ball, they recorded an XG of just 0.19, they looked predictable in their build-up, unable to move the ball forward or create chances from open play, and unsure of how to take the initiative, all in a home game. And every single subsequent home game confirmed this to be the case. Opponents would come away from playing Spurs marvelling at how predictable they were, how poor they were in possession, and how easy they were to stop, especially when so much of their play was exclusively directed down the sides and never through the middle of the pitch. And over time, the negative atmosphere toxified relations between the fans, the team, and Frank himself. They were better away from home, but in November's North London derby defeat to Arsenal at the Emirates, Frank's negative 5-4-1 setup added to fears that he did not fit with Spurs. After that game, Frank lectured his players in the dressing room about standards dropping. The next day, multiple players, including club captain Christian Romero, still turned up late. The club denied that this was the case, but the example of Romero is an instructive one and part of why the club realised that they had such an issue with leadership over the course of the season. Sources close to the players would repeatedly refer to the lack of direction on the training ground, or to the fact that, after a defeat, the players would get too down on themselves, with no one there able to lift spirits and refocus them on the task ahead. It left a miserable mood during Frank's last 2 months, which no one could ever really shift. Many of the players did not enjoy the limited nature of Frank's football. A source close to one senior first-team player, speaking on the condition of anonymity to protect their relationship, said just before Frank's dismissal that he was ultimately a coach for a, quote, smaller team, focused on compact defensive shape, long balls and counter-attacks. Now, Frank was desperately unlucky with injuries, but his failure to connect with the players proved to be one of his biggest problems. A long-standing training ground source told The Athletic that the players would ultimately run through brick walls for Postecoglou, whatever his faults, but they knew that they did not have to work as hard for Frank. This meant that, in the eyes of this source, they never trained with the same intensity they showed under the previous manager and knew that they could get away with less. Frank was Levy's last big appointment at Tottenham, and his dismissal is the first big test of the post-Levy era. It was clear for some time that the hierarchy did not want to sack him, and he lost the fans and the players long before he finally lost the people running the club. The focus all season had been on patience, giving time for his cultural changes to take root. The hope was that if backed, he could transform the whole club, but instead, Frank was corroded by toxicity and negativity faster and more painfully than most of his predecessors. After the 2-1 defeat to Newcastle, CEO Vinay Venkatesham had finally seen and heard enough, and made his recommendation to the board to make a change.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.